Imagine standing in a crowded hall, the air thick with anticipation, as a lone philosopher steps into the dim light, his silhouette cutting through the murmur like a blade. The hush that follows is almost tactile, a shiver that races through every spine in the room. You feel it in your bones, the weight of his gaze, the promise in his voice. Words coil around you like serpents, each phrase unspooling an idea so potent it stuns your senses, silencing objections before they even form in your mind. That, dear reader, is the power of an intimidating intellect, a force that bends the very fabric of reality to its will, not through brute strength or flashy theatrics, but by wielding thought as a sharpened instrument. And buried deep within the annals of history, in the private notebooks of one of the fiercest minds to ever walk the earth, lies a dark secret, a blueprint for crafting a mind so unassailable, so quietly commanding, that it brooks no rival and concedes no defeat. We've all felt it, that gnawing fear that our voice won't carry, that our ideas will evaporate into the void before they can leave a mark. Maybe you've watched as more confident peers commandeer conversations, hold rooms in thrall, shape opinions with effortless authority. Or perhaps you've experienced the sting of your own doubts, the inner critic whispering that you're not sharp enough, not bold enough, a striking testament to mediocrity masquerading as humility. It's a universal ache, the longing to be heard, to matter, to stand unmoved when the tides of skepticism crash against your resolve. Yet, in the same breath, there's a nagging question: at what cost does one pursue this mantle of intellectual supremacy? When does the hunger for dominance become a hunger that devours the very soul of inspiration and compassion? Friedrich Nietzsche walked this razor's edge. A man whose prose could ignite revolutions and whose solitary ramblings in the mountains birthed concepts so explosive they still reverberate through our collective consciousness. But behind the thunderous aphorisms and the scathing critiques of morality lay a private methodology, a clandestine alchemy that turned vulnerability into an edge, self-doubt into unwavering sovereignty, empathy into strategic insight, solitude into a forge for original thought, and individual creed into a weapon against the shapeless masses. It is here, in the interstices of his philosophy, that we uncover the paradox at the heart of formidable intellect. The more you embrace what makes you afraid, the more you become capable of inspiring both awe and intimidation in others. Picture the moment when you glance at your reflection and catch the flicker of uncertainty in your own eyes. That flash of vulnerability is not a weakness to conceal but a raw material to transmute. Nietzsche whispered of a more fatty, loving one's fate, embracing every fracture and scar as a badge of honor rather than a blot to hide. Imagine harnessing that capacity to adore your own hardships, to weave them into a tapestry of resilience so compelling that no skeptic can tear it apart. Think of the power you'd wield if every sting of failure became fuel for a deeper, more unshakable conviction. This is the first secret. In accepting your own vulnerability, you build a fortress of inner strength that stands impregnable against the arrows of doubt. Yet, fortress walls crumble without vigilant guardians. The true battle for intellectual dominance rages within the corridors of your mind, where voices clash in a cacophony of "you're not ready" and "you can't do this." Here lies the second secret: the inner monologue is your sovereign domain. When you seize the reins of self-talk, you transform chaotic whispers into a clarion call of authority. What if, each morning, you greeted yourself with a phrase so potent, so resolute, that it reshapes your neural pathways and primes you to command any room you enter? That simple act of self-declaration can rip the rug from under anxiety, dismantle the architecture of self-doubt, and erect a throne of mental sovereignty where you reign unchallenged. Once you've mastered your inner dialogue, the stage shifts outward. You become fluent in the dialect of influence, reading subtle gestures and hidden intentions as clearly as an open book. Imagine practicing a mental role play with every person who challenges you, anticipating their objections, molding your arguments to touch the precise nerve that elicits respect. This strategic empathy, drawn from Nietzsche's perspectivism, isn't about sentimental vulnerability, it's about seeing through the eyes of others to navigate the battlefield of minds. When you anticipate an adversary's move before they make it, you shift from reactive defense to proactive influence, turning every conversation into a subtle negotiation of power. But no weapon remains sharp without a guiding creed. Nietzsche scorned the borrowed doctrines of society, urging each individual to craft their own values, a personal manifesto that serves as both map and compass. Picture yourself drafting a one-sentence motto so incendiary it shakes the foundations of conventional thought. That motto becomes a beacon, attracting kindred spirits from afar and repelling the faint-hearted who cling to mediocrity. Let it be your rallying cry, your philosophical exclamation point that declares to the world, you answer to no one but your own reasoned convictions. All of this, however, demands the crucible of solitude. The great thinkers of history didn't find their groundbreaking insights in the din of social approval but in the hush of isolation, where every distraction falls away and the mind turns inward to wrestle with the raw material of existence. Nietzsche retreated to remote sanctuaries, enduring loneliness as a pathway to illumination, emerging with revelations that would upend entire paradigms. Consider carving your own thinking sanctuary, even if it's just a silent corner of your home or a half-hour of uninterrupted walk. In that space, ideas ferment and transform until they coalesce into visions so bold they demand attention. And when these threads, vulnerability embraced, inner voice honed, empathy strategized, credo forged, solitude endured, are woven together, you arrive at Nietzsche's dark secret. Real intimidation doesn't spring from coercion or fear, but from the quiet certainty of self-overcoming. It's the radiance of one who has weathered every storm within and emerged tempered, unbreakable, and luminous. That is the superior mind, not a tool for subjugation, but a beacon of possibility that dares others to rise or risk being eclipsed by your glow. Ask yourself now, what would you sacrifice to become truly unshakable? What fractures in your past are waiting to be recast as pillars of strength? Can you reframe the voice in your head from a jailer to a commander, an internal critic to an unwavering ally? Are you ready to step into the cloak of strategic empathy, to peer into the hearts of others and influence with subtlety rather than force? What single belief could you declare today that would forever alter the trajectory of your life? Where in the stillness of solitude might you unearth the next revolution in thought? These questions linger on the cusp of action, daring you to proceed deeper into the labyrinth of Nietzsche's teachings, where each turn reveals a new facet of intellectual power waiting to be claimed. So lean in. Feel the pulse of your own potential quicken as you sense the contours of a mind being reshaped, honed into an instrument of profound influence. In the chapters that follow, you will uncover the first foundational principle, a paradox that underpins all true power. A revelation that, once absorbed, will shift your very understanding of what it means to think, to persuade, to stand unshaken at the eye of life's storms. The path ahead demands courage, for you'll be asked to confront the shadows within yourself, to transform your deepest vulnerabilities into the bedrock of unassailable strength. But on the other side lies an existence unfettered by the shackles of doubt, a realm where your intellect commands attention, respect, and even a measure of awe. Dare to ask, could you build a mind that intimidates anyone? Are you prepared to unlock Nietzsche's dark secret and let its power flow through your every thought, word, and action? The journey begins now. Brace yourself for a descent into the heart of intellectual alchemy, where the most formidable weapon you will ever wield is the mind you carry beneath your skull. Quirito a spectador. Confira se você ainda está inscrito no canal. Às vezes, a inscrição pode ser cancelada automaticamente, então é sempre bom verificar. Aproveite e se torna membro do canal. Como membro, você terá benefícios incríveis, como assistir aos nossos conteúdos semanais. Além disso, você pode apoiar nosso trabalho sendo financiador do canal com value. Isso ajuda-nos permite investir em ferramentas melhores e elevar a qualidade de produção dos nossos conteúdos. Junte-se a nós nessa jornada e faça parte de nossa comunidade. E compartilhar gente aí nos comentários de que cidade você está escutando esta história e que horas são por aí agora. Part 1. The paradox of vulnerable strength. Few truths strike deeper than the discovery that what we most fear to reveal can become our greatest weapon. Picture a general, battle-worn and haunted by past defeats, stepping onto a dais and confessing, "I once led my men into a valley of death." A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Here stands a leader who does not pretend to be invulnerable, yet commands every eye and every heart. This disarming admission, far from undermining his authority, cements it. Nietzsche called this alchemy amor fati, the fierce embrace of one's fate, scars and all. When we choose to love our fractures rather than conceal them, we forge a fortress stronger than any steel rampart. And within that contradiction, power sown from pain, lies the first secret of a mind that intimidates anyone. All across history, figures who weaponized their own traumas have reshaped the world. Consider the poet whose trembling voice echoed with the memory of an abandoned childhood, only to captivate aristocrats and revolutionaries alike. He did not shed tears in private chambers, he bared those wounds in public verse, transmuting sorrow into a shared communion of strength. His rhythm pulsed with authenticity, demanding respect not through bluster but through the stark honesty of his vulnerability. In that moment, every skeptic felt exposed, because we recognize, deep down, that our own hidden cracks might one day betray us just as surely. By owning our pain, we hold a mirror to the collective fear of imperfection, and in that reflective gaze we seize an undeniable psychological edge. Yet most of us do the opposite. We mask our vulnerabilities beneath a brittle facade of polished competence, terrified that any glimpse of weakness will invite scorn. We avoid difficult conversations for fear of revealing our doubts. We sculpt our social media personas until they gleam with selective triumphs, while the shadows of regret and insecurity fester behind the lens. This default mechanism, hiding what hurts, carries a hidden cost. Every unacknowledged scar drains our authenticity, starving our presence of the magnetic charge that only raw honesty provides. We become statues carved of words rather than living testimonies of resilience, and a statue, no matter how beautiful, cannot intimidate a thinking, breathing audience. Nietzsche challenged us to subvert this instinct. Amor fati demands that we love our fate, join arms with every fracture in our history, and celebrate it as a badge of honor. Imagine reframing every setback, from a failed pitch to a broken relationship, as an essential frame in the mosaic of your character. Each betrayal, each moment of self-doubt, becomes unassailable evidence of your capacity to endure. You no longer cringe at the memory of defeat. You parade it as proof that you have stared into the abyss and returned, eyes burning with the clarity of purpose. In doing so, you no longer need to manufacture intimidation with posturing or force. The gravity of your own survival story exerts a silent, unbreakable pull on those who encounter you. Psychologically, this transformation overturns the shame mechanism that binds so many minds. Shame whispers that we must hide our defects or risk rejection. But when we choose to spotlight the very thing shame hopes to conceal, we hack the system. Shame has no fuel left to burn. Instead of shrinking from criticism, we preempt it through radical honesty. Like a sword tempered by fire, our edges glint with hard-earned truth, and any blow struck against us is repelled by the strength of our embrace. This is not mere bravado, it is a rooted confidence born of genuine acceptance. And confidence, seasoned with humility, radiates a formidable aura that both disarms opposition and draws respect. So how do we begin to transmute our vulnerabilities into strategic assets? First, name every wound you've carried into the room. Write it down in brutal detail, every sleepless night, every tremor of doubt, every whispered taunt that stung like acid. Then, confront each item as though it were an adversary on the battlefield. Ask yourself, what did I learn from this moment? What resilience did it force me to cultivate? Convert each bitter memory into an insight, each pang of regret into a blueprint for growth. This is the work of alchemy. The once toxic lead of trauma becomes the pure gold of personal power. Imagine dedicating a weekly ritual to this practice, a ceremony where you light a candle, sit with your journal, and greet your ghosts as honored guests. In the glow of flickering light, you speak aloud the truths you've never dared share, feeling the tension in your chest loosen with every uttered confession. This act of naming and reframing is the hammer and anvil upon which your inner warrior is forged. Over time, you'll notice a curious shift. Those very admissions that once sent tremors through your confidence now anchor your presence, like deep roots that hold a towering oak steady against hurricanes of doubt. Yet the societal script we've inherited still screams vulnerability is weakness. Friends might tease you for oversharing. Colleagues may question your professionalism. In that friction lies another paradox. The pressure to conform reveals how radical your choice truly is. When you stand unflinching in your truth, the collective resistance becomes a spotlight illuminating the potency of your stance. Allow that tension to fuel your conviction rather than shake it. Each raised eyebrow and whispered aside is testimony to the disruptive power of genuine self-acceptance. And disruption, when wielded with integrity, is the birthplace of influence. History offers a vivid illustration. A once obscure statesman, humiliated by scandal, chose not to retreat into silence but to spearhead his redemption with a public address confessing his mistakes, detailing the lessons learned, and outlining a bold vision for the future. His authenticity shattered the cynicism that clung to his reputation, and he re-entered the political arena with a moral authority no opponent could match. By spotlighting his own fallibility, he reclaimed the narrative and cemented his command over both allies and adversaries. That is the muscle you build when you transform personal pain into public proof of perseverance. Now, pause for a moment and recall a time you felt utterly broken. Maybe it was a dream deferred, a promise betrayed, or a gruesome misstep that echoed in your mind for weeks. Close your eyes and feel the ache of that memory. Then ask yourself, what hidden value lay within it? What unexpected strength, what newfound clarity, what compassionate insight did that fracture ultimately gift you? If you struggle to find an answer, lean into the discomfort. Sometimes the gold is buried beneath layers of resentment and regret, waiting for patient excavation. Your task is to excavate not for closure, but for revelation. As you unearth these insights, you'll notice a shift in your posture, literally and figuratively. Your shoulders relax, your gaze steadies, your voice gains a timbre of unassailable confidence. When you narrate your past with candor, listeners lean in, drawn by the magnetism of someone who refuses to hide. They sense the raw energy of someone tempered by adversity, and in that energy they find themselves challenged, provoked, and ultimately moved. This is the heart of intimidating intellect, not militaristic bluster, but the deep, resonant power of authenticity that echoes in the mind long after the words have faded. There is, however, a danger to this path, falling into the trap of perpetual victimhood. Embracing vulnerability does not mean wallowing in pain or seeking sympathy. Your confession is not an invitation to pity, it is a declaration of sovereignty. You own your past, but you do not remain its prisoner. Each memory is a teacher, not a jailer. Keep your focus on the lesson, on the transformation, on the new narrative you are authoring. As Nietzsche would remind you, the only way to heal a wound is to embrace it fully, to stare into it until it becomes a portal to your greatest strengths. The metamorphosis you undergo here lays the groundwork for every subsequent principle. By mastering the paradox of vulnerable strength, you claim the first foundational pillar of Nietzsche's secret, an inner fortress erected from the very stones that once threatened to crush you. But even a fortress must have vigilant sentries. In the next step, you will turn your attention inward still, to the ceaseless conversation that courses through your mind. For if your vulnerabilities are the ramparts, then your self-talk is the gatekeeper that either welcomes confidence or admits doubt. Learning to discipline and direct that inner voice will amplify the power you've forged from pain, transforming silent scars into a clarion call that commands every hall you enter. Keep that in mind as you walk away from this exercise. The battlefield of your mind awaits, and the first skirmish will determine whether your newfound fortress stands impregnable or crumbles beneath old whispers of "you're not enough." Prepare to confront those echoes in the next chapter, where you'll discover how to seize control of your internal dialogue and amplify the resonance of every hard-won insight. Until then, reflect on the fractures you've reclaimed and feel their transformative power coursing through your veins, because the journey into unshakable strength has only just begun. Part 2. The voice that commands the room. As you step beyond the fortress of vulnerability you built in the last chapter, you find yourself face to face with the most relentless opponent you'll ever encounter, the voice inside your head. That ceaseless commentary, sometimes whispering encouragement, often snarling doubt, shapes every decision before your lips even part. Nietzsche insisted that true sovereignty begins in the theater of the mind, where we either become captives of our anxieties or architects of our own authority. Imagine your internal monologue as a crowded amphitheater. Every thought clamors for attention, some urging retreat, others demanding courage. Without a measured command, that chaos will seize the podium and drown out your convictions, leaving you mute in every critical moment. Consider the story of Lucia, a young orator whose hands once trembled so violently she could barely hold her notes. Each time she stood before an audience, her inner critic unleashed a torrent of "you'll embarrass yourself" and "why do you even try?" Until one day, following a late-night read of Nietzsche's exhortation to become one's own sovereign, she rewrote her internal script. Instead of demeaning whispers, she began each morning by affirming, "My voice matters, my ideas reshape worlds." Slowly, the tremors subsided. Room by room, stage by stage, Lucia's presence shifted from anxious supplicant to commanding queen. People didn't just listen, they leaned forward, attuned to every nuance of her tone and every flash of her gaze. What made that shift possible wasn't magic or flattery, it was discipline, taming the unruly voices within by replacing them with a single, unwavering truth. Self-doubt is a cunning adversary because it masquerades as caution, promising protection but delivering paralysis. It highlights every possible flaw, every hypothetical failure, until you're too petrified to utter a word. Commanding your inner dialogue means recognizing doubt's lies for what they are, distortions that amplify fear and silence ambition. When you strip away the theatrics, you expose an uncomfortable question. If you don't convict your own self-judgment, Who will? Allowing any thought to hold veto power over your aspirations is tantamount to surrendering the throne of your mind. But is silencing internal critics a form of intellectual tyranny? Nietzsche would argue that it is not. Tyranny implies cruelty and domination for its own sake, whereas mastering your self-talk is an act of self-liberation, a radical restructuring of your cognitive hierarchy. You're not obliterating doubt, you're relegating it to its proper station, an occasional advisor, never the general. Think of your mind as an ancient court. Many voices petition you for attention, but only a single, sovereign decree governs the land. By cultivating that decree, your core affirmation, you recalibrate the power balance and transform every doubt into a subordinate who serves your purpose rather than sabotages it. To begin this transformation, you don't need complex rituals or weeks of silent meditation. One micro-exercise can rewire your neural pathways and prime your psyche for command. At the break of dawn, find a quiet corner, by a window, on a balcony, or even in a parked car. Close your eyes and take 5 deliberate breaths, feeling tension drain from your shoulders. Then, aloud or in your mind, utter a concise power phrase that resonates deep in your gut. It could be, I own this moment, my perspective demands respect, or I create impact with my words. Repeat it 10 times, each iteration with growing conviction, until the words echo in your marrow. This simple act stakes a claim on your inner throne, setting a precedent for the day ahead. As you carry this sovereign mantra into every interaction, you'll notice a subtle shift in the way others perceive you. Your voice gains a steady timbre, free of tremors and fillers. You pause less to search for approval and more to deliver insights that cut straight to the heart of the matter. People stop interrupting you because they sense your authority. Even in disagreement, they adjust their tone, bracing themselves against the force of your presence rather than dismissing you outright. That internal decree, fired each morning, ripples through your posture, your eye contact, and the cadence of your speech, orchestrating an atmosphere of respect before you utter a single substantive point. Psychologically, this practice undermines the self-fulfilling prophecy of anxiety. When you rehearse self-assurance, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, begins to register confidence as the baseline, recalibrating your fight-or-flight reflex. Over time, those spikes of panic become mere ripples in an ocean of calm, and you learn to navigate high-stakes moments with measured clarity. This is the disciplined quieting of dissenting voices without annihilating them, honoring their cautionary insights but refusing to grant them veto power over your intentions. You're not forging a robotic stoicism, you're cultivating an adaptable command center that remains poised even under fire. The ethical dimension of this shift deserves reflection. When you silence internal critics, you risk overlooking constructive feedback, those voices that nudge you towards self-improvement. The challenge lies in distinguishing between unproductive rumination and valuable critique. The former breeds immobilizing fear, the latter fuels strategic refinement. To maintain this balance, build a feedback ritual. After each major presentation or conversation, solicit 2 truths and 1 stretch, 2 authentic observations about what went well and 1 area for growth. By doing so, you welcome useful scrutiny without allowing it to hijack your confidence. You become both sovereign and scholar of your own performance. Imagine your mind as a grand orchestra, with dozens of instruments representing each thought and emotion. Left to its own devices, it produces discordant noise, an anxious cacophony that frustrates your intent. Your sovereign decree becomes the conductor's baton, guiding each section to play in harmony. Self-doubt switches from an overly loud trumpet assaulting the ensemble to a muted cello adding depth and richness. Doubt still exists, but it no longer dominates the composition, it supports it. Under your direction, every cognitive faculty converges toward a singular purpose, clear, commanding communication that reverberates long after the final note. In practical terms, anchoring your inner voice requires occasional recalibration. Schedule a monthly audit, revisit your power phrase, assess its impact, and refine it if needed. As your goals evolve, your mantra must evolve too, reflecting fresh ambitions, new challenges, and deeper insights into your own psyche. Perhaps I own this moment gave you bravery at first but now feels too generic. You might upgrade to My Insight Reshapes Perspectives, a bolder claim that matches your growing influence. This ongoing tune-up ensures your internal script remains sharp, relevant, and aligned with the fields in which you forge your path. Embrace the tension that arises when you assert authority over your self-talk. That tension signifies growth, the friction between your current state and your aspirational self. Resist the temptation to collapse under its weight or to ignore it altogether. Lean into it, treat it as evidence that you're stretching beyond comfort, and acknowledge the exhilaration that follows when you rise above the doubts. Each small victory over your internal critics compounds, forging a habit of confident speech that becomes virtually automatic in high-pressure situations. Now, pose this question to yourself: if your inner dialogue could only say one phrase all day, what would you choose? This single sentence must encapsulate your highest purpose, your unshakable belief, and your invitation to command attention. It may feel audacious, even absurd at first. After all, your old narratives will rebel. But this rebellion is exactly what you want. Each time doubt sputters and sparks against your chosen phrase, you reinforce its strength by repeating it with calm insistence. That friction burns away old insecurities and cements a new identity: speaker, leader, sovereign. Consider David, a mid-level manager who dreaded presenting financial forecasts to executives. His nightly ritual centered on worst-case scenarios: they'll think I'm incompetent. By adopting a nightly affirmation, "My analysis drives strategic decisions," he rewired his expectations. His palms no longer sweated, his voice no longer cracked, and he began to field tough questions with poised, data-driven responses. His colleagues leaned in, executives nodded, and his reputation soared. All because he seized control of the narrative inside his head and refused to let doubt write the headlines. This disciplined approach to self-talk doesn't just impact formal presentations, it shapes every conversation, every email, every internal debate about speaking up or staying silent. With practice, the phrase you choose becomes an internal flag, waving above the din and guiding your thoughts toward clarity and conviction. You'll notice yourself thinking less "I can't" and more "I will," less "what if I fail," and more "here's how I succeed." Those subtle shifts accumulate, transforming your presence in any room, office, conference hall, dinner table, into an unspoken declaration of authority. If you've ever felt steamrolled by your own mind, know this: the opposite state is within reach. You don't need to vanquish every whisper of doubt, but you must demote its dominion. In doing so, you unleash a voice that commands attention not by volume, but by the unwavering belief that your perspective earns respect. That confidence ripples outward, influencing tone, posture, and the subtle choreography of any dialogue. People begin to anticipate your contributions, adjust their own energy, and engage with a spirit of deference that elevates every exchange. As you internalize this principle, you'll see that commanding your inner voice is foundational for the next stage of Nietzsche's dark secret, mastering the perceptions of others. Once you've established an unassailable command within, you're ready to extend that authority outward, reading subtle cues, anticipating objections, and shaping conversations before they even begin. But that journey begins only when you've silenced the cacophony inside and proclaimed yourself sovereign over your own mind. Now breathe deeply, feel the echo of your chosen phrase settling into your consciousness, and own the power it carries. Reflect on how this practice alters the way you move through the world. When you're ready, we'll step through the looking glass of empathy and exploration to the third secret, the mirror of others' minds. There, you'll learn not just to command your own dialogue, but to wield a nuanced influence by understanding thoughts that aren't your own. As you emerge from the sanctum of your own sovereign self, having staked your claim on the throne of your inner dialogue, a new frontier unfolds, the vast landscape of other people's minds. Here lies the third pillar in Nietzsche's clandestine architecture of intimidation, a tool more subtle, more potent than any rhetorical flourish or burst of self-assurance. It is the capacity to inhabit another's perspective so completely that you sense their next thought before it even forms, to navigate the hidden contours of their desires and fears with the precision of a seasoned cartographer. This strategic empathy, born from Nietzsche's doctrine of perspectivism, demands more than mere sympathy. It requires you to deploy your curiosity like a blade, carving through assumptions to grasp the interior world of your interlocutor. When wielded with integrity, it transforms every encounter into an exercise of anticipatory influence, bending the meeting of minds to your advantage without the faintest whiff of coercion. Consider the tale of Ambassador Alessandro Martini, who, at the height of a volatile summit, faced a rival envoy notorious for mercurial bargaining and thinly veiled threats. Instead of meeting aggression with equal force, Alessandra retreated into a private chamber and summoned the fragments she had learned about her counterpart's background, the loss of a father and political unrest, the fierce pride she took in her family's legacy, the unspoken yearning for recognition in a man's world. By donning this mental costume, slipping into the shoes of her adversary, Alessandra anticipated the hidden gambits that would otherwise blindside her. When the two met again, she presided over the dialogue with a calm surety that seemed almost prophetic. Each concession she offered resonated with the envoy's deepest longings, each rebuttal sidestepped the tenderest nerve. In the end, a treaty emerged that satisfied both sides, and Alessandra's poise became the whispered standard for all future diplomats. Yet you might wonder, does stepping so fully into another's psyche risk dissolving your own edge? Does empathy render you vulnerable to manipulation, or sap the sharpened intelligence you've crafted through vulnerability and self-sovereignty? Nietzsche would whisper that real power arises from tension, the interplay of contrasts. In learning to read someone's mind, you do not surrender your convictions, you illuminate the landscape in which those convictions will land. When you see the precise angles of resistance, you refine the trajectory of your words, ensuring they strike with surgical accuracy rather than brute force. Your empathy becomes the lens that focuses your intellect, no longer diffused by guesswork but concentrated on the precise coordinates of influence. Too often we stumble through conversations like hikers lost in a forest, mistaking our own footprints for the path ahead. We misinterpret a raised eyebrow as annoyance rather than intrigue. We answer a critic's jab with blunt retorts that fan the flame of hostility, and we miss the silent pleas for affirmation that lie beneath every query. This default mode, a chaotic dance of projecting our insecurities onto others, leaves us adrift, vulnerable to misreads and missed opportunities. The result, strained relationships, stalled negotiations, and the gnawing regret that our intellect, as honed as it may be, fails to land when it matters most. You cannot intimidate a room you cannot read. The greatest speeches fall flat when delivered to uncomprehending ears. To command any audience, you must first map its psychic terrain. Nietzsche's perspectivism offers precisely that cartography. Rejecting the illusion of a singular, objective truth, he insisted that every mind is a prism, refracting reality through its own desires, fears, and biases. When you acknowledge that your interlocutor inhabits an entirely different vantage point, you open a portal into their motivations. You begin to see the world as they see it, the honor they would protect at all costs, the resentments that surge beneath their civility, the aspirations that give their arguments weight. This is not sentimental immersion, it is a cold-blooded inquiry into the mechanics of another soul. You become both detective and diplomat, gathering clues in tone, posture, and choice of words, and then deploying your responses with the inevitability of a well-tuned machine. Practically speaking, the exercise of strategic empathy begins with mental role play. Choose a person who has challenged you, an obstinate colleague, a critical family member, a rival whose tactics you've yet to crack. Close your eyes and reconstruct their world. Imagine their morning ritual, the newspaper headlines that caught their eye, the childhood milestone that shaped their stubborn pride. Name the 3 most likely fears that underlie their objections: fear of irrelevance, of betrayal, of loss of control, and envision how each fear colors their argument. Then script a dialogue in your mind's eye. Listen to their objections in full, without interrupting, as though you were hearing them for the first time. Only after you have absorbed their perspective do you step back into your own shoes and craft a reply that addresses not just their words, but the trembling currents beneath them. This isn't a manipulative game, although it can be used ruthlessly by those lacking scruples. It is a matter of intellectual respect. By honoring the validity of another's experience, you earn the right to be heard. You transform adversaries into partners, skeptics into engaged listeners, by demonstrating that you truly see them. When a friend feels that you understand the weight they carry, they lower their defenses and meet you with openness. When a business rival recognizes that you've anticipated their strategy, they approach negotiations with a grudging admiration. Your words cease to land like stones on a shield. They flow like water into channels you've already excavated. Of course, there is tension here, and probing another's mind, you risk unearthing your own biases and blind spots. You may discover that you've been driven by jealousy rather than ambition, that your impatience masked a fear of being outshined. This self-reflection is the price of entry into the realm of strategic empathy. Nietzsche would remind you that self-knowledge and knowledge of others are inseparable, like 2 sides of the same coin. To read another's soul is to hold a mirror to your own, revealing dimensions you never suspected. This recursive insight amplifies your power. Each empathic encounter refines your understanding of the human psyche, which in turn sharpens your ability to influence the next mind you encounter. Imagine applying this framework at work. You're about to present a proposal to your manager, who's known for a brusque style and a reputation for nitpicking. Instead of bracing for a grilling, you pause to reconstruct their mental blueprint. You recall that your manager was once passed over for a promotion due to budget cuts, and that pride in their competency remains raw. In your presentation, you begin by acknowledging their track record. I know you've steered complex projects through tight margins before, and I've built this proposal with those same rigor and efficiency in mind. Instantly, you disarm the anticipated criticism. Your acknowledgement signals that you get them, that you speak their language. The room shifts. The objections you feared dissolve into a collaborative revision cycle. You have, in essence, commanded the room not by demanding submission, but by aligning your intellect with theirs. This kind of empathetic intelligence doesn't only grease the wheels of professional life, it transforms personal relationships too. When you truly see a loved one's emotional landscape, the anxieties that animate their behavior, the unspoken hopes that shape their choices, you navigate disagreements with the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. Instead of reacting to a terse text message with defensive, you perceive a note of fatigue or stress, and respond with patience rather than inflamed retort. When you mirror compassion and insight, you become an anchor in the storms of others' lives. That anchor, paradoxically, exerts a gravitational pull. People gather around you, drawn to the reassurance that they will be heard, understood, and met on their own terms. So who in your life could you better understand today? Whose unspoken words are dying to be heard, whose hidden wounds need gentle illumination? Begin with a single conversation. Listen not just to the facts, but to the silences between them. Notice the slightest shift in tone, the fleeting hesitation, the fascination that sparks in their eyes. Let your curiosity be your guide. Resist the urge to formulate your response while they're still speaking. Instead, dwell in the fertile tension of not knowing. When it is your turn to speak, tie your reply to the empathy you've excavated, reference their concerns explicitly, validate their feelings authentically, and then position your insight as a bridge between your perspectives. As you practice this discipline, you'll witness a remarkable phenomenon. Your intellectual presence gains an almost magnetic pull. People lean in not because they fear you, but because they trust you. They afford you the benefit of the doubt, the courtesy of their full attention, the openness of their most guarded thoughts. In those moments, your intimidation is not a weapon but a beacon, the incandescent promise of genuine connection woven into the certainty of mutual comprehension. And in that fusion of clarity and care lies the true genius of Nietzsche's third secret, influence that intimidates not through dominance, but through an unwavering command of perspectives. Yet this secret, formidable as it is, remains but one strand in the tapestry of intellectual power. Like a blade forged of many metals, your mind's edge grows keenest when hammered by the heat of vulnerability, the steel of self-sovereignty, and now the prism of empathy. But there is another element waiting in the wings, a force that will transform your humility and your insight into a personal credo so electrifying it unsettles every convention you encounter. A credo that becomes your philosophical weapon. In the next chapter, we will embark on the alchemy of self-authored values, revealing how to craft a manifesto that strikes at the heart of conformity and rallies kindred spirits to your cause. Prepare to forge your own credo, a single sentence that will echo through your life like a thunderclap, unsettling complacency and commanding respect in equal measure. Part 4. Forging your philosophical weapon. You've seen how embracing your fractures sharpens your presence, how commanding your inner dialogue erects an unshakable throne, and how strategic empathy wields a scalpel through the minds of others. Now comes the forge, where raw insight and lived experience melt together in a crucible of your own design. Nietzsche didn't merely urge you to live by someone else's values or to parrot society's stale dogmas. He demanded the creation of a personal credo so vivid, so tightly bound to your essence, that it becomes both shield and spear. This is where you declare your own rallying cry, a single sentence that resonates with your deepest yearnings and unsettles every pattern of conformity you encounter. In that declaration lies both liberation and danger, the power to unify your life under a single, unassailable truth, and the risk that rigid attachment to one principle might blind you to fresh revelations. Yet without this forged weapon, your intellect scatters like loose arrows. It is time to hammer your most radical convictions into a manifesto that cannot be ignored. Imagine an artist walking through the galleries of avant-garde Europe in the early 1900s, eyes burning with dissatisfaction at every canvas that whispered polite landscapes and comfortable abstractions. Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, the founder of Futurism, felt society draped in rust and antiquated mores, and he grabbed paper and pen like a blacksmith seizing a hammer. His Futurist manifesto exploded onto the cultural stage with declarations so bold: we glorify war, we demolish museums, we exalt the beauty of speed, that readers recoiled in shock or rallied in ecstasy. That feverish one-page document became the engine of an entire movement, unleashing painters, poets, and dreamers to smash the marble idols of the past and race headlong into an electrified future. Notice that Marinetti did not issue a tentative suggestion. He delivered a creed capable of splitting the world in two. His words cut through hesitation and carved out a new realm of possibility. A personal sentence, once articulated with conviction, can become a bonfire igniting kindred spirits or a wrecking ball demolishing stale certainties. Contrast this with the believer who picks up a second-hand doctrine, an inherited set of values stitched together from family myths, religious platitudes, or management-speak motivational posters. These borrowed beliefs lack the catalytic heat of authenticity. They may comfort or placate, but they seldom thrill or intimidate. When you recite someone else's slogans, your voice carries the hollow ring of imitation. You become a parrot in a cage, repeating words that lack the resonance of your own convictions. No one fears a parrot. But when you proclaim a credo born from your struggle, your discoveries, your darkest nights of the soul, the very air around you crackles with possibility. Suddenly, every room you enter vibrates with the question, who is this person, and what is the secret at the heart of that fierce declaration? Yet here lies the paradox. The very creed that galvanizes you can calcify your mind if treated as an immutable law. Nietzsche warned against the dogmatism of any ideology, even one you forged yourself. A rigid manifesto can become mental handcuffs, preventing you from adapting to new data or embracing unforeseen opportunities. It can blind you to the subtle wisdom that emerges from further reflection, and worst of all, it can transform you into a zealot more concerned with defending your doctrine than with living its spirit. The challenge, then, is twofold. Craft a credo that is potent enough to rally your will and guide your choices, yet supple enough to evolve as you grow. Think of it as a living banner, its fabric strong and vibrant but stitched in segments that you can replace or repair as experience dictates. How do you begin this alchemy? First, excavate the core lessons of your journey so far. Reflect on the conversations that shook you awake, the betrayals that honed your discernment, the triumphs that revealed what truly matters. What pattern emerges when you survey these moments? Perhaps it is a relentless demand for honesty, a refusal to settle for half-truths. Maybe it is a dedication to radical creation, a vow to chase beauty even at the risk of ridicule. Or it could be a promise to champion unseen voices, to shine light on what most wish to ignore. The common thread becomes the sinew of your creed. Pull on it, stretch it, and see if it wants to extend further in one direction or another. This self-excavation ritual is not academic, it is a dialogue with every fiber of who you have been and who you yearn to become. Once you have identified that thread, compress it into a single, declarative sentence. Do not dilute it with qualifiers or subordinate clauses. It must hit like a thunderbolt, searing the sky of your convictions with unambiguous clarity. For example, an environmental activist might crystallize decades of research and passion into "I will outlast every standing forest to restore what is stolen from the earth." An entrepreneur could compress years of trial and error into "I transform failure into the fuel of my next success." A counselor might carve a lifetime of empathy into "I refuse to let anyone face their darkness alone." Each of these sentences functions as both compass and catapult, guiding every choice and propelling every action. When you speak or write words aligned to this credo, your resonance multiplies. You become less a collection of uncertain intentions and more a coherent force of nature. As you draft this sentence, feel its weight in your mouth and its pull in your chest. Speak it aloud until the phonemes vibrate through your bones. Let it become the first thought in the morning and the last before you sleep. Notice the friction that arises when you stumble against it in your behavior. That friction is a sign of dissonance, of where your current self falls short of your highest self. Embrace that tension as the crucible of transformation. Each time you realign your actions with the creed, you forge it deeper into your identity. Over time, you'll discover that living by this rule becomes effortless, like breathing, because you have integrated it into the very logic of your being. But beware the temptation to flaunt your credo as a badge of superiority. Nietzsche would scorn any display of moral vanity. Your declaration is not a platform for self-congratulation, but a mirror reflecting your ongoing commitment to self-overcoming. When you wield your manifesto, do so with humility, acknowledging that yesterday's truths may evolve tomorrow. Allow the sentence to guide but not cage you. Encourage feedback from trusted allies, those who will call you out when your actions stray, and challenge you to refine your creed when new insights emerge. This keeps your philosophical weapon sharp without turning it into a blunt instrument of dogma. Consider the case of an urban activist who settles on the motto, "I will bulldoze bureaucracy to rebuild community." At first, this one line summons courage, rallies volunteers, and dismantles red tape. City officials quake as grassroots networks surge to life under that banner. But 6 months in, the activist notices growing distrust. Neighbors feel steamrolled by the same bulldozer spirit intended to help them. The creed, once liberating, has become too literal, a wrecking ball that tramples nuance. Faced with that realization, the activist revises the credo to, "I will dismantle obstacles and nurture new roots," restoring balance between force and care. That pivot doesn't dilute the original power, it refines it. It acknowledges the complexity of transformation, ensuring the weapon you wield remains in service of your highest aim rather than an unchecked ego. Ask yourself now, what belief could you declare today that would shift your world? Do not rush this question. Let it sit in the back of your mind while you go about your day. Notice which thoughts spark a stirring in your spirit, which phrases feel like they demand articulation. You might start with several candidates and test drive them in conversation or journal entries. Pay attention to moments when your eyes light up or your chest tightens with anticipation. That is your credo calling to you, urging you to give it form. Give yourself permission to experiment, to refine, to even abandon sentences that ring hollow under scrutiny. The true credo emerges through iteration, not decree. When that single sentence emerges fully formed, clear, evocative, uncompromising, engrave it onto your daily practice. Place it where you can see it at dawn, on your mirror, your desktop wallpaper, or the inside cover of your notebook. Make it the first thing you recite before any major decision, the last thing you whisper after each day's work. Let it guide your yes and your no, the projects you undertake and the habits you shed. After years of diffuse intentions, you now hold a philosophical weapon so precise that every action echoes its intent. You cease to wander, you charge with purpose. And others, sensing the integrity of your self-crafted line, cannot help but lean into your trajectory. There is a deeper level still, linking your unique credo to a community of those who share its vibration. When Marinetti's followers plastered their manifesto across city walls, they weren't just making noise, they were inviting comrades into a shared revolt. A powerful personal credo becomes a banner under which others rally, forging alliances that amplify your impact. Look for those who resonate with your statement and invite them to co-create, to test your creed against the pulse of collective life. This is not about mass indoctrination, it is about convening a tribe of disparate individuals united by a shared banner of possibility. Together, your combined focus yields momentum far beyond your solitary force. Yet even as your manifesto gathers followers, remain vigilant against its ossification. Host periodic reflections, quarterly or annually, where you and your circle deconstruct the original sentence, sifting out what still ignites and what now constrains. Let your credo breathe and expand, absorbing new insights while shedding obsolete clauses. This living process is the hallmark of Nietzsche's vision, a perpetual act of self-creation and self-overcoming. Your philosophical weapon remains deadly not because it never changes, but because it evolves in concert with the sharpening of your own mind. You have now arrived at a critical threshold. You possess the first four pillars of Nietzsche's clandestine architecture: vulnerability embraced, inner sovereignty claimed, empathy wielded, and a creed forged. Each element alone is potent. Together, they constitute an integrated arsenal of intellectual influence. But there is a hidden catalyst yet to be woven into this framework, an element that transforms personal conviction and strategic empathy into a reservoir of revolutionary insight. It lies in the crucible of solitude, where ideas ferment in silence and original thought springs forth unannounced. Solitude is more than isolation. It is the furnace in which every facet of your mind's weaponry merges into a single, incandescent force. In the next chapter, we will explore how to cultivate and endure creative exile, turning aloneness into your greatest ally and completing the final preparations before unveiling Nietzsche's ultimate dark secret. Part 5. The Alchemy of Intellectual Isolation. Imagine slipping away from the hum of everyday life into a place where silence isn't an absence but a presence so vivid it shapes your thoughts like wind-carved stone. In that hush, every stray anxiety falls away, every social script unspools, and you stand alone with the raw material of your own mind. Nietzsche himself retreated to the Swiss Alps, trading the clamor of salons for mountain huts so remote that the only visitors were ravens and the distant echo of cowbells. There, cut off from approval or dissent, he wrestled with the lonely grandeur of his ideas until they coalesced into aphorisms that would shake the foundations of moral philosophy. That crucible of solitude, where the din of the world is reduced to a faint echo and your mind becomes the sole interlocutor, is the forge in which revolutionary thought is born. Think of Ludwig Wittgenstein, who sequestered himself in a Norwegian hut without running water or electricity, subsisting on boiled potatoes and the purity of his logical investigations. He scribbled propositions on scraps of paper by candlelight, contending with the limits of language until he uncovered the very structure of meaning itself. In that self-imposed exile, devoid of accolades or distraction, he faced the terror of nothingness and emerged with the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, so succinct, so radical that it redefined the boundaries of analytic philosophy. This is the alchemy at work. Isolation sharpens the edge of your intellect by stripping away every superfluous comfort, forcing you to confront the bedrock assumptions you normally skirt in conversation or collaboration. Yet solitude carries an emotional weight that can crush as easily as it can liberate. When you choose to isolate yourself, you trade the warmth of human connection for the chill of self-confrontation. Loneliness, that gnawing companion, magnifies every doubt and intensifies every self-critique. In the stillness, you might find yourself spiraling into the absurd question, if no one hears my words, do they even matter? This is the existential crucible, the risk that isolation will become despair, that the voice echoing back from empty walls will be the voice of self-doubt incarnate. The danger is clear. Without discipline, creative exile can morph into unproductive rumination, trapping you in circles of indecision and regret. But here's the secret. Within that tension between exhilaration and agony lies a unique form of intellectual freedom. When every external reference point falls away, you are compelled to forge new internal landmarks. You learn to trust the quiet turning of your own thoughts, to allow insights to emerge unhurried by the need for immediate validation. In solitude, your mind becomes a laboratory, your feelings test subjects, and every hypothesis about yourself open to rigorous experimentation. You discover that the strongest ideas are often those born in the vacuum between distractions, concepts that bloom not in the bright glare of groupthink but in the soft, unbroken night of introspection. To cultivate this crucible, you don't need to flee to a mountain retreat, though if you can, by all means do. You can carve out just 30 minutes a day in a quiet corner, a makeshift sanctuary free of pings, chimes, and human proximity. Turn off your phone, close your laptop, and let your mind wander without purpose. Resist the urge to fill the silence with podcasts or playlists. Instead, notice the slightest tremor of thought, the drift of an idea, the shape of an unexamined belief. You might feel exposed at first, as though you're naked before your own consciousness. But gradually, that vulnerability becomes fertile soil, and you'll find seeds of original thought sprouting where there was once only noise. There's a psychological mechanism at play. Isolation interrupts habitual neural pathways, dissolving the autopilot that steers your daily cognition. When you break the loop of routine stimuli, emails, texts, meetings, you force your brain to chart new routes. That detour can initially feel disorienting, a dizzying sense of unmoored identity, but it's precisely what births novelty. You begin to connect disparate ideas, revise old assumptions, and playfully reimagine problems without the weight of external judgment. In solitude, your intellect becomes both scientist and explorer, free to ask crazy questions and pursue wild answers that would be censored in social settings. Yet isolation alone is not enough, you must also endure it. Endurance, in this context, is an act of will. Each time loneliness presses its cheek against your shoulder, whispering that you're wasting precious time, you must steel yourself and sit with the discomfort. Think of it as strengthening a muscle. Every minute you resist the impulse to check your phone or seek distraction reinforces your capacity for deep thought. Over weeks of regular practice, that muscle grows resilient. Soon, you'll crave the stillness as much as you once craved the bustle of notifications. Your mind learns to dive beneath surface anxieties and swim in the deeper currents of creativity. Consider Emily Dickinson, who famously lived most of her life in reclusive domesticity, peering through her window at the world while her poems, locked in drawers, pondered life, death, and the infinite. Her solitude yielded a body of work so profound that readers centuries later still feel the ache and wonder she distilled in concise, elliptical lines. Dickinson's isolation was not some tragic withdrawal but an intentional embrace of solitude as a space for unfiltered introspection. She treated her bedroom like a laboratory, her pen an electron microscope revealing the subatomic particles of emotion and perception. Without that self-imposed exile, she might never have accessed the singular voice that now echoes through generations. Of course, solitude demands boundaries. It's all too easy to slip from intentional isolation into self-imposed exile, where you avoid not only noise but also necessary social support. Nietzsche's own life illustrates this pitfall. His periods of intense creativity were often followed by debilitating loneliness that fractured his health and strained his relationships. He learned, sometimes too late, that even the loneliest philosopher needs occasional contact to prevent the mind from folding in on itself. The trick, then, is to alternate deep-sea dives of solitude with surfacing breaths of connection, emails to a trusted friend, a walk with a colleague who shares your intellectual appetite, a brief check-in that reminds you the ideas you're forging have a world beyond your cabin. Pragmatically, you can schedule thinking Sabbaths, blocks of time where you go offline entirely for solitude, followed by integration moments where you review your insights with someone you trust. Share your raw sketches, your half-formed theories, your metaphors that ring odd but promising. Listen to their reactions, not to rewrite your ideas to please them, but to test their clarity and emotional resonance. This interplay between isolation and social feedback ensures the ideas you distill in solitude are tempered by reality and sharpened by exchange. It's the synergy of alchemy. Solitude provides the raw ore, connection furnishes the refining flame, and together they produce a metal so pure it glows. Another reason isolation is vital, it cultivates independence of thought. In a world awash with opinions, algorithms, and influencers, the rare voice that pauses to reflect before repeating the chorus becomes startlingly distinct. When you've sat alone long enough to hear the cadence of your own convictions, you no longer parrot popular narratives or chase trends. You originate them. People may bristle at the novelty. After all, a voice unanchored to the prevailing currents can feel threatening. But that very threat is the hallmark of true intellectual intimidation, not the bullying shout of repetition, but the quiet authority of original insight echoing in the stillness of minds unaccustomed to listening so deeply. There's also a paradoxical social advantage. The more you retreat into solitude to hone your thought, the more magnetic your presence when you return to company. In conversation, you no longer cling to talking points or default anecdotes. You move with the ease of someone who's wrestled with ideas at the deepest level. You drop insights into dialogue like gemstones, each facet reflecting the time you spent alone polishing its edges. People lean in, sensing the carved depth beneath your words, and they give you the gift of focused attention, a rare currency in an age of distraction. Your isolation, once hidden in the recesses of your schedule, becomes palpable in the weight of your contributions. But you must pay careful heed to the tightrope of humility. Isolation can inflate the ego if you're not vigilant, cultivating a sense that your solitary hours grant you superior wisdom. That pride corrodes the gains of solitude faster than any external noise. Always approach your solitary work with a beginner's mind, aware that no matter how long you've sat with an idea, there's more to learn. Let curiosity, not vanity, be your companion in the quiet. Question your conclusions relentlessly. Invite reconsideration even in the absence of other voices. This posture of radical openness ensures that your isolation remains generative, not dogmatic. So pause now and consider, where could you carve out a thinking sanctuary? Perhaps it's a corner of your home bathed in morning light, a bench in a secluded garden, or even a quiet seat on your daily commute where you don't touch your phone. Commit to that space as your own philosopher's cell, if only for a precious span of time each day. Guard it rigorously, protected from the siren call of emails and social media. In that sanctum, allow yourself to wander through thought experiments, sketch half-crazed diagrams, and feel the friction of questions pressing against the walls of your mind. Celebrate the discomfort as evidence of exploration. You are probing territories no one else has charted. As you establish this ritual, you'll begin to notice a shift. Ideas that once felt elusive will surface with surprising clarity. You'll connect patterns across disciplines, notice recurring symbols in your life, and uncover the hidden scaffolding of your own beliefs. That internal architecture, revealed through consistent solitude, becomes the scaffold for any future intellectual edifice you erect. When you emerge from your sanctuary and bring those insights into the world, they land with a weight and originality that turns heads and sparks curiosity. Yet this phase is but the penultimate step. The final secret lies in weaving the fruits of your isolation back into the vibrant tapestry of social influence, integrating the radiance you discovered in solitude with the relational strategies you've honed. When you combine the alchemy of your solitary insight with the power of vulnerability, sovereign self-talk, strategic empathy, and a clarion credo, you unlock Nietzsche's ultimate dark secret, the ability to intimidate not by overshadowing others, but by illuminating new horizons so compelling that they reshape collective thought. In the next chapter, we will delve into that synthesis, revealing how to bring your solitary revelations into dialogue with the world, completing the architecture of a mind that brooks no rival and invites everyone to rise in its glow. Part 6. Nietzsche's dark secret revealed at the summit of our ascent through Nietzsche's clandestine architecture, the final vista unfolds. A revelation so paradoxical that it eludes every simplistic formula for power. You have dug deep into your fractures and claimed strength from vulnerability. You have seized the reins of your inner narrative and transformed self-doubt into sovereignty. You have stepped into the shoes of others, reading minds as skillfully as you steer your own. You have hammered raw conviction into a living creed that pulses through your days. You have retreated into solitude's crucible and distilled your rawest insights into unassailable gold. Each pillar alone stands formidable. Together, they form an intricate lattice that supports the true edifice of intimidation, a structure not built on fear or force, but on the radiant certainty of self-overcoming. Imagine now a manuscript, bound in dust-sprung leather, discovered in a dim corner of Nietzsche's study after his passing. In it lies a private note, almost hidden beneath half-erased aphorisms and margin sketches of abyssal landscapes. The note is titled On the Superior Mind, written in fevered handwriting, each sentence bristling with urgency. A mind that brooks no rival does so not by crushing others but by compelling them to surpass it. The final weapon of intellect is illumination, casting a light so bright that shadows flee, and all who stand before it must either step into the glow or shrink from it. He who terrifies does so by exposing the vastness of what one is not yet capable of. This is the dark secret. The apex of intimidation is not the roar of dominance but the dawn of clarity. You do not terrify by overwhelming. You intimidate by revealing potential so breathtaking that lesser visions retreat in awe. Picture a modern-day leader embodying this principle. She strides into a conference room from which dozens have previously trudged away with resignation. Instead of opening with commands or fear-laced threats, she shares her latest setback, an unexpected market collapse that nearly toppled her company. The room stills, not in mockery but in empathy, because she has shown her own humanity. Then, with calm authority, she unveils the blueprint for a more resilient enterprise, decentralized teams empowered to innovate, a culture of radical transparency, and a commitment to continuous reinvention. She speaks not from a pedestal of unassailable success, but from the forge of her own failure, tempered into insight. As she details the horizon she sees, her colleagues lean forward, electrified by the breadth of her vision. They grasp that by transcending yesterday's limits, they too can ascend. In that moment, intimidation becomes an invitation, a compelling summons to become more than they believed possible. This electrified presence flows from the seamless integration of your 5 pillars. Vulnerability supplies authenticity, vulnerability's echo inspires trust. Sovereign self-talk fortifies every word with unshakable confidence. Strategic empathy channels those words into the precise nerve of each listener's world. Your creed imbues each assertion with a deeper purpose. Solitude has honed every insight to razor sharpness. When these currents converge, you emanate a force stronger than mere argument or authority, a force that lands like a revelation, shifting paradigms rather than enforcing submission. True intimidation, Nietzsche suggests, arises when you illuminate possibilities so vast that everyone around you must either follow or be left clinging to smaller truths. This revelation carries an acute existential dilemma. Will you wield this secret to dominate, to amplify your ego at the expense of others? Or will you use it to liberate, to uplift, to open doors that were once sealed by fear and conformity? The distinction is subtle but decisive. Domination may grant immediate compliance, but it breeds resentment and eventual collapse. Liberation may demand greater courage and patience, yet it galvanizes sustainable allegiance and fosters transformation that outlasts any single reign. Nietzsche's superior mind is not a tyrant's crown but a torch held aloft in the darkness, inviting all to step beyond themselves, to transcend boundaries. The greatest intimidation, therefore, compels not through coercion, but by revealing the extraordinary potential dormant within each onlooker. Imagine yourself tomorrow morning standing before that private journal's echo. You rise, press your creed onto your lips, and feel the solidity of its truth. You step into your day fortified by your sovereign mantra, every cell attuned to both your inner authority and the anticipatory empathy that guides your voice. You arrive at a meeting and open by disclosing a recent failure, without apology, but with purpose. The admission resonates, shifting the room's energy from guarded defensiveness to collaborative inquiry. You navigate questions with the precision of a mind that has rehearsed their fears and cracked their code. You weave your narrative through the prism of your personal credo, each phrase striking with clarity honed in solitude. By the time the dialogue ends, everyone present senses that they have glimpsed something greater than the isolated ambitions of any individual, a shared possibility so vivid that retreat is no longer an option. This is not a hypothetical exercise. It is the living application of Nietzsche's final secret. The mind that intimidates anyone does so by transcending the narrow confines of personal ego and societal script. It stands in stark relief, not as a shadow over others, but as a sunrise banishing the gray complacency that dulls ambition. In that moment, the shift you engineer is internal as much as external. You hold a mirror up to each person's dormant greatness, and in their reflection they choose whether to cower or to rise. The power you wield is not measured in the capitulation of dissenters, but in the ignition of new visions across minds once muted by doubt. Now comes the task of embodying this synthesis in your daily life. Begin by weaving micro-rituals that link each pillar into a single continuum. At dawn, before the world stirs, revisit your solitude sanctuary, even if for 10 deep breaths, to surface fresh insights. Follow with your sovereign affirmation, speaking it so insistently that doubt recoils at its clarity. As you move through the day, practice strategic empathy in every encounter. Pause to sense the unspoken currents beneath each conversation, anticipating needs before they crystallize. When you share ideas, anchor them in your creed, framing every project as an extension of your deepest purpose. And when you publish, present, or lead, never hesitate to confess a recent setback, transforming vulnerability into the seed of collective resilience. Each of these acts alone carries weight. Together, they catalyze the superior mind into living, breathing reality. Yet be vigilant. The secret's potency invites misuse. Should you drift toward ego gratification, collecting blind followers, or wielding influence as leverage for personal gain, you will betray the very principle you have so painstakingly assembled. Your mind's edge will dull, and you will become a caricature of the philosopher king, wielding power without wisdom. To guard against this, cultivate a practice of periodic reflection with a trusted confidant, someone unafraid to challenge your biases, to remind you of the difference between influence that enlightens and influence that enslaves. Let your solitude and your relationships stand in dynamic tension, each correcting the other when imbalance arises. Consider the story of a tech innovator who once commanded headlines for bold product unveilings. His every keynote was a spectacle of bravado until, one day, he integrated Nietzsche's secret. He began to acknowledge the flaws and uncertainties in his prototype live on stage, an admission that initially caused murmurs of skepticism. But he followed immediately with a vision of collaborative co-creation, an open-source platform inviting user communities to iterate with him. That act of vulnerability, coupled with an empowering creed, "We build not to dominate markets, but to amplify human ingenuity," shifted the narrative. Investors, customers, even competitors rallied around his platform, drawn not by fear of being left behind, but by the promise of a shared journey. His intimidation no longer lay in monopolistic threat, but in the radiance of a collective possibility that expanded the playing field for everyone. As you ponder this transformation, ask yourself, what would it mean to become such a beacon? To carry a mind so illuminated that it dissolves small-minded posturing and reframes every encounter as an opportunity for mutual elevation. If you hesitate, note the friction. It reveals where your own ego still clings to narrower definitions of success. That hesitation is a compass pointing to the next edge you must claim. Lean into it. Use your solitude to interrogate the origins of your reluctance, then refine your creed to encompass not only personal mastery but the extension of that mastery into generative collaboration. The final invitation of Nietzsche's dark secret is to live this framework as an ongoing practice, not a completed achievement. Intellectual alchemy is not a destination but a perpetual cycle of transformation, vulnerability sparking resilience, self-sovereignty radiating confidence, empathy illuminating hidden landscapes, creed uniting purpose, solitude forging originality, and the resulting illumination inviting every mind to ascend. Each moment you cycle through these stages, you intensify the brilliance of your presence and the depth of your impact. You become a living testament to the power of self-overcoming, a presence so luminous that none can ignore it, and many will choose to follow its glow. So here you stand, at the threshold of Nietzsche's ultimate revelation. The superior mind is within reach, not as a monument to ego, but as a living flame that dispels the darkness of small ambitions. The question now is not whether you can intimidate, but whether you will harness this secret to kindle a fiercer light, one that transforms doubt into determination, fragmentation into synthesis, and isolation into a beacon for collective ascent. How will you wield this dark secret in your life's next chapter? What horizon will you illuminate with the full force of your integrated mind? The dawn awaits your command. The world is poised on the brink of new possibility. Step into the glow, and let the superior mind you have forged lead the way. You've traced the contours of a hidden architecture, layer by layer, until the final blueprint stands revealed, a mind that intimidates not through the blunt force of dominance, but through the incandescent clarity of self-overcoming. You've seen how embracing your own fractures forges a fortress of authenticity, how commanding your inner dialogue elevates doubt into disciplined sovereignty, how stepping into another's psyche transforms every encounter into an opportunity for anticipatory influence, how crafting a personal credo galvanizes your will into a single electrifying beacon, and how retreating into solitude's crucible distills raw insight into original thought. All these elements converge in the superior mind's culminating revelation. True intimidation arises when you illuminate potential so vast, so exhilarating, that lesser visions shrink away. Now, at this threshold, you are faced with the starkest question of all. Will you stand as a torchbearer, banishing complacency and inviting excellence, or will you succumb to the temptations of ego and mastery as ends in themselves? It is here, in the hush that follows revelation, that the moral weight of intellectual power presses upon you. You can wield this secret like a sword, cutting down opposition, stifling dissent, fortifying your position atop the hierarchy of ideas. Or you can let its radiance serve as an invitation, a catalyst for collective ascent, an opening that dares others to transcend their own limitations rather than bow to your supremacy. The difference may seem subtle at first, but it shapes the very legacy you leave in every mind you touch. It is one thing to shock a room into silence with uncompromising pronouncements. It is quite another to spark a wildfire of possibility, where each ember becomes the beginning of a new blaze in someone else's soul. Which path will you choose when you step back into the arenas of everyday life? Picture the week ahead as your testing ground. Choose a single strand of this framework: vulnerable authenticity, sovereign self-talk, strategic empathy, personal credo, or disciplined solitude, and weave it into your routine. Feel the weight of that choice each morning as you rise. Let your vulnerability become a story you share at the table, letting the gravity of your struggle become a silent invitation for others to lower their shields. Let your sovereign mantra greet your reflection before the world rouses you to its demands. Let your empathy probe beneath polite exchanges and sense the unspoken undercurrents in every conversation. Let your creed guide every decision, sharp and unyielding. Let your moments of solitude become pilgrimages into the unknown territory of your own mind. As you live this experiment, observe where friction arises, those trembling spots where old narratives clutch at your resolve. Therein lies the map to further transformation. Do not mistake friction for failure. Each uneasy moment is a signal that you are pushing against the hardened boundaries of your previous self. Notice the rapid heartbeat when you confess a hidden scar in a meeting. Observe the awkward pause when your mind, freed from routine stimuli, conjures an unexpected idea in solitude. Feel the tension when you anticipate another person's unspoken concerns. Align your response to their invisible coordinates. Let each spark of discomfort illuminate precisely where you must attend next. Lean into it rather than recoil. That is the alchemical process by which raw experience transmutes into unbreakable presence, solidifying insights into habits and habits into the lived architecture of the superior mind. Integration is your greatest ally. The solitary insights you've plumbed must not remain fragmented moments of revelation. They must be threaded through the fabric of your relationships, your work, your quiet hours alone. When you draft an email, let your creed echo in your phrasing. When you convene a team, let your sovereign command of self-talk guide the tone of every directive. When you sit across from a friend, let strategic empathy sharpen your listening until you can hear the tremor beneath their words. When you retreat after a long day, let solitude's sanctuary be the place where you distill the day's lessons into fresh purpose. This seamless weaving of principles into action will transform your mind from a theoretical marvel into a living, breathing force that reshapes the currents of every environment you enter. Yet remain vigilant. The potency of this framework tempts the unguarded ego toward misapplication, toward manipulation disguised as empathy, toward dogmatic rigidity clothed as personal creed, toward performative solitude that masks an aversion to accountability. Guard against these distortions by fostering an inner tribunal of integrity. Seek out one or two confidants willing to hold your intentions to the light of honest critique. Let their questions probe your motives. Are you aiming to coerce or to collaborate? Are you listening to learn or to confirm your own brilliance? Are you retreating to think deeply or to avoid the messy work of human connection? The mirrors may sometimes clash with your self-image, but those collisions are the sparks that keep the blade of your mind honed. As days turn into weeks, document your journey. Journal the revelations born in silence, the shift sparked by your sovereign mantra, the subtle power of empathetic anticipation in conversation. Chronicle the moments when your creed felt too narrow, and the courage it took to refine it. Note the instances where your vulnerability drew others into communal strength rather than pity or derision. Over time, your record becomes both testament and roadmap, a vivid portrait of how a mind can ascend through disciplined alchemy rather than brute force. Share your insights sparingly with those who will value them as offerings, not as trophies, and watch as the cycle of illumination radiates outward, igniting fresh revolutions in every direction. There is no final summit to conquer, only a horizon that recedes eternally before you, beckoning with ever-widening vistas. Each step of vulnerability, sovereignty, empathy, creed, solitude, and synthesis reveals new fissures in your understanding, novel terrains of possibility. The superior mind is not a static fortress but a dynamic field of cultivation, one where your brightest light becomes a magnet drawing others into the orbit of shared transformation. Your challenge now is to become that magnet, to let the dark secret you've claimed glow so fiercely that no dim ambition can linger in its wake. To transcend intimidation as coercion, and transform it into an invitation to become more than anyone ever thought possible. So rise to this summons with both humility and resolve. Let every interaction become an opportunity to test the integrity of your framework. Let every failure, every misstep, be welcomed as yet another fracture to transmute into radiance. Let every success be anchored not in self-satisfaction but in the spark it kindles in others. Ask yourself again at waking and at rest, how will I wield this secret today? What fracture will I embrace? What mantra will I affirm? Whose mind will I seek to understand? What creed will shape my choice? Where will I retreat for clarity? And how will I bring this distilled insight back into the world? These questions are living companions on a journey without end. The dawn of your empowered mind is not a gift handed to you by an absent philosopher, it is a covenant you make, day by day, with the highest vision of what you can become. The world will not pause in deference. It will continue its ceaseless din, its whirl of ambition, its cascade of opinions and distractions. But you, armed with Nietzsche's darkest secret, will surge through the noise like a flare, illuminating new possibilities, drawing the doubtful into audacious action, reshaping every room you enter. The only question that remains is whether you will embrace this path with the same ferocity that tempered your vulnerabilities and the same openness that refined your solitude. The superior mind demands nothing less than the full force of your commitment. Now, walk forward. Carry this revelation beyond the pages of theory into the everyday crucible of life. Stand in rooms both grand and mundane, and let the quiet power of your integrated mind bend reality toward the horizon of possibility. When others shrink before doubts or hide behind polite masks, stand in the glow of your own illumination. Invite them to step into that light, or watch as they gather courage to follow in your wake. In every choice, every word, every silent moment of contemplation, you will be wielding the most formidable weapon ever conceived, the mind you have forged from your own triumphs over fracture. How will you wield this dark secret in the chapters yet unwritten? The world awaits your answer,